And welcome back to Whiskey Politics at Ricochet.com. I'm Dave Sussman, your host and purveyor at whiskeypolitics.net, where you can find us all over the internet. You can find us at iTunes.com, where if you can subscribe and give us a 5-star rating, that would greatly be appreciated. Here at Chapman University in Orange, California, and I'm delighted to be sitting with Jo Ann and Dr. Mark Skousen. Jo Ann is the founding, and I just want to make sure I've got this correct, the founding director of the Anthem Film Festival, which is held at FreedomFest. And Dr. Skousen is the founder of FreedomFest, and also, if I understand correctly, you were the president of the FEE, the Foundation of Economic Education. Is that correct?
For 1 year.
For 1 year. But you've also done a lot more than that. You are a professor here at Chapman University, and I greatly appreciate you welcoming us here today. Thank you.
Glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So I'm here to talk to you about several different things, which includes upcoming Freedom Fest, which is going to be really exciting again, and I definitely want to get into all of that and talk about that with you. Just at the beginning of our episode here, for folks that are tuning in, Freedom Fest is going to be held when? This summer?
Yep, July 11th through the 14th. We always like to have it around 7-Eleven in Vegas, being a lucky number. And it's at the Paris Resort in Las Vegas. This will be our second year there. In our 11th year, we had our 10th anniversary last year, and we're very excited about this year with our theme, Is There a Voice of, or Where is the Voice of Reason, is our theme. We have a theme every time, and we chose this theme because of all the craziness going around in the world. Where is the voice of reason? And of course, that's Freedom Fest. That's the idea.
Right. And Freedom Fest caters really to more free markets, free minds, libertarian viewpoints. Does Reason have any part of that? Reason Magazine?
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, it's the 50th anniversary of Reason Foundation and Reason Magazine. Yeah. And they're co-sponsoring with us a number of events. They're having Reason Day there. Mm-hmm. They're doing the Reason Media Awards at a Saturday night banquet. They're bringing in a lot of their people. But of course, we attract people, all the free market think tanks, in addition to Reason, such as Cato and Students for Liberty and Heritage Foundation and so forth. The idea is to bring together everybody in the freedom movement once a year to learn from each other, to network, to socialize, and to celebrate liberty.
Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I was there last year. I've been the last few years, and last year was phenomenal. As we were setting up here, we were talking about Bill Shatner making his keynote speech. The films last year, which I want to get into with you, were fantastic, and many of them are still going on. But this has been a really tumultuous year. I mean, it's incredible what we have seen from the policies that have been implemented, the drama coming from D.C. and the White House, the arguments that have been taking place. And I'll give you just one quick example. We're dealing right now, as we're speaking today, with this argument about tariffs on steel workers and the manufacturing of steel and aluminum to certain countries around the world. Where do you sit, and what does the libertarian viewpoint and the free market viewpoint think about what we're seeing currently right now with tariffs?
Well, there's definitely a step backwards. Any kind of movement toward protectionism, I kind of wonder at what point did Donald Trump fall asleep during his economics classes at
Wharton.
At the Wharton School, because this is one area where all economists are in agreement that free trade is the best way to go. And Trump is, I know he's responding to the reason why he won, supposedly, but remember that he actually did not win the popular vote, and that the vast majority of people have benefited from globalization rather than hurt from it. There are a small sector of the economy, the steel workers, in the manufacturing sectors has been in decline. But this is a long traditional trend. If you look at the trends for the last 2 centuries, we've gone from being highly agricultural to being more of a manufacturing base to now being a service-oriented. And that's the way economic growth works. Every country goes through it. And so if you retard that, if you're trying to go back to the good old days, it's actually a step backwards in terms of our standard of living.
So as we're heading more towards, and you call it a service, and some people are saying information and technology is going to be really taking over. We want to talk about one of the films that's talking about this as well. You know, we've come from an agrarian society, agricultural based, and now it's service oriented, and we're focusing on technology as the future. Yet manufacturing, they're trying to, is this just basically blowing on the embers to keep a dying industry alive? Is it focused on getting votes in specific steel Rust Belt states? What do you think it's due to that we're focusing on this all of a sudden?
Certainly political, and it's not, this argument of national security is a bogus argument because it's a very small part of military expenditures with the steel industry. It's like 3%. And most of our allies are the source of imported steel from Canada and Brazil, very little from China and Russia, who would be considered perhaps our enemies. But look, one thing about globalization is that countries that trade together stay together. So if you create belligerence with trade wars, that actually increases our chances of actual military engagement. So it's a very dangerous road that Trump is going down. And I understand the idea of getting a better deal, so to speak, in trade negotiations through this method. That's the argument that's being made. And perhaps that will be helpful in that regard. But it's very disrupting right now to the system. It's also it's a real test on Wall Street. Because the stock market's not going to continue to rise if we enter a major period of protectionism that Trump seems to be leaning us in that direction.
From your perspective, do you look at, and I mentioned to you that we just spoke with Grover Norquist about this, do you view tariffs as a tax?
Yeah, sure. It's just another name
just
for
another
a tax. Some conservatives support it because the Constitution's very emphatic about tariffs being a legitimate way to raise money. Mm-hmm. So those who are constitutionalists have often argued in favor of tariffs. But it's a different era, and if you look at the long-term trend, the rates of tariffs have been declining, a long-term secular trend, which is a very positive thing. Mm-hmm. So you want open borders as much as you can. You want to see trade. And it goes back to David Ricardo's law of comparative advantage.
Right.
We need to go to countries that have the best comparative advantage. And the long-term trend is definitely toward free trade, and this is a step in the wrong direction, in my opinion.
I would agree with Trump on one thing, and that is it's difficult for American manufacturers to compete with foreign companies that don't have the high taxes that our manufacturers have to pay. But a better way to have gone about this would not have been to impose tariffs on Canada or China or Russia, but to reduce the taxes on American manufacturers so that they can compete in a free market, and then prices wouldn't have to go up for the consumers, because ultimately it's the consumer who pays the tariff. We're the ones who are going to have to pay more for our cars and our computers and our soda cans. It's going to be across the board, and the consumer pays that. So reduce the taxes, don't impose a tariff.
Do you think what we're seeing right now is negating the tax reform that then just took place? Because everybody's been applauding that.
Well, it is. It is in a way, and I mean it's not the same thing. A tariff is imposed on the foreign materials coming in, but ultimately it raises the price of the finished good. So he's just looking at he's supporting the domestic manufacturers, but at the cost of the consumer.
Right.
There's a lot more people involved. There's 160,000 steel workers that are benefiting, but there's 6 million steel consumers, users of steel, that are affected with higher prices. So you're benefiting a very small group at the expense of a very large group. You know, the sign of a good economist is you look at the effects not just on one group but all groups, not just on the short term but the long term. That was Henry Hazlitt's great book called Economics in One Lesson, so we should all send a copy of that to Donald Trump. Maybe Larry Kudlow will present him a copy when he sees him.
He's seeing the he's seeing the problem, he's finding the wrong solution, I think.
And you think the right solution goes back to what you were talking about, David Ricardo, we talk about Adam Smith, laissez-faire, open markets, free markets. Now, I think here's what confuses me. I think they know this because they've already done carve-outs for NAFTA, Canada and Mexico. They're already talking about doing a carve-out for England because they're producing the steel that our military buy, naval ships or whatever it may be. So somebody in the White House is saying, yeah, but. So I'm wondering where the dichotomy is there in the White House. And it goes back to what we were just talking about regarding maybe this is just a political, because they say ultimately it might be 600,000 people that will be affected out of 320 or 40 million people, whatever the number is in this country. It's this insignificant, tiny little fraction, right?
Yeah. He tends not to see the long-term consequences. He sees the short-term consequences. Short-term, it's going to be good for the steel industry in America. Long-term, it's going to be bad for consumers across the board. Okay. And it's going to be bad for our neighbors in other countries.
Yeah,
the whole trade war idea.
Why would you want a war? Trade should be a cooperative thing.
Or is it a negotiation position for him to start because he is a deal maker?
Yeah.
Yes, we shall see.
Right? I think a lot of us are kind of crossing our fingers hoping that's what it's going to be, that he's just using this as a starting point. But
Could be.
We're already starting to see the carve-outs. But and then from what I understand, and I just learned yesterday, that there is now a new tax cut coming for capital gains. I don't know if this is breaking news.
Oh.
It's literally just coming out.
That would be great.
And
I'm a big fan of that, because right now the rate was at 15%. Now it's gone up to 23.9%. Right. It's a huge increase, and so you're seeing a lot of investors holding off, selling assets and moving them to their best use. Why? Because of the huge tax associated with it. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, they say that there's going to be trillions of dollars that are become liquid all of a sudden.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because otherwise nobody wants to sell it because you're going to have to pay so much money.
This is a major argument of the supply siders, which I think is correct.
Yeah. So we've got generally positive reviews on the Trump economic policies, except for this trade then over the past year.
Yeah,
you never know. I mean, I'm not happy with what he's doing on restoring civil asset forfeiture. Okay. We were going in the right direction with that. It's basically giving police.
Now, this was Jeff Sessions, right?
Yes, but under the direction of Donald Trump. I don't know if there was a camera in the room when he was talking to some sheriffs who brought up civil asset forfeiture.
Like it was a great idea.
And they were explaining it to him. Of course, it's the sheriffs who were explaining it to him. And he said, so this is just getting money away from the bad guys, right? The drug dealers. Yeah. We're getting it away from the drug dealers. Oh, well, we've got to stop that. He didn't understand that it's a license to stop anyone on the street, charge them with any kind of potential problem, and then just taking their money, their car, and then they have to sue to get it back. And so it's been terribly harmful to ordinary people
and minorities.
And particularly to minorities. We had a film about this 2 years ago called Seized that told the story of a man who had just cashed his income tax refund and was on his way to pay his tuition for college. And the police pulled him over because he was driving the wrong kind of car. It was too nice of a car for someone of his skin color. And one of the police officers said, I think I smell marijuana in here. We're going to have to take everything. They brought out the dog. The dog doesn't find anything, but they take the money, they take the car. The young man ends up not being able to go to school because he can't pay his tuition. He loses his basketball scholarship. Eventually, he gets back a very small amount because now he becomes the plaintiff, so he doesn't get a pro bono defense attorney because now he's the plaintiff and he has to pay his attorney 40% to get his money back. There's been no due process. There's been no conviction. There's no innocent until proven guilty. And so I think it was 24 states had voted to weaken those laws, even rescind them completely, and now Trump and Sessions want to reinstate them. So we're back to being able to steal money from ordinary citizens.
They're big on the war on drugs, unfortunately. So there are some negatives. The deregulation of business, the business tax cut, those are two real strong positives, no question, and that's what's driving the stock market higher. But these other factors, every administration has good things and bad things, and we don't want to ignore the bad things like civil asset forfeiture.
Yep.
And the war on drugs. That's a very big issue because that's a step backwards from what the states are doing to legalize marijuana use and so forth.
What's your opinion on that? Because we see that you got legalized since last year. The state of California has legalized recreational marijuana. You're starting to see that percolate across the United States. And as we know, what starts in California moves eastward eventually.
We will have a debate on that at Freedom Fest because, interestingly, I'm starting to see libertarians who have always been for decriminalization, legalization of drugs. But now that the opioid crisis has hit, even libertarians whose families are now being affected by it are starting to think, maybe this should be illegal. But Colleen Cowles, who will be at Freedom Fest, has done research for 15 years on it, and she has discovered over and over again that legalizing makes it easier to get help, makes it easier to overcome addiction. So we'll have a debate on this at Freedom Fest, on the drug war.
I had Gary Johnson, Libertarian candidate for president 2012-2016. I was at CPAC, and we sat down with him for half an hour, and this was a big part of our discussion. And I really wanted to try to, square this with him because obviously he's a big proponent of legalizing drugs. He openly admits that he smokes marijuana while he's, riding his bicycle up in Taos, New Mexico. Fine, if that's what he believes. I asked him to square with the opioid crisis that the addiction levels are so insane that we're having literally tens of thousands of people dying. And what would legalizing that do for something like a prescription drug that is already, I guess, legal, maybe without a prescription, or with a prescription? It's not legal without a prescription. But doesn't that, we're going to be talking about it at Freedom Fest, but from a libertarian standpoint, for our listeners right now, you said that there's a little bit of vacillating.
Well, yes, because they're starting to say this is affecting my family, my son, my brother, my wife. So now they're starting to think, how can I keep this away? How could we avoid this addiction? But again, when it's illegal, when you're breaking the law, you're less likely to get help because in order to admit that you need help, you have to admit that you're a criminal. That you somehow got these drugs on the black market, or you found a prescription pad and you wrote yourself a prescription, or some other devious criminal method. If they're legal, then you can get help. Then you can have addiction facilities that can help you overcome the addiction. I still think we need to treat it as a health problem, not a criminal problem.
Do you see a change from the Libertarian Party viewpoint eventually with this? Because I personally, I lean libertarian on social issues, on fiscal issues, government out of my pocket and my bedroom. That's my perspective. But I have a serious issue with legalizing just everything, right? And that kind of scares me. I'm a father, and so I look at it from that perspective. Is that something you think the Libertarian Party is going to grapple with and maybe come to a different conclusion eventually? I don't know. It might open the door to...
Again, I think the more open things are, the easier it is to address them.
Yeah.
Look at alcohol. Now that alcohol is not legal until you're 21, parents are not allowed to teach their children to drink responsibly. So they're all off in the corner in the darkness, binging so that nobody can see them drinking. They're becoming alcoholics at younger and younger ages because their parents aren't allowed to teach them how to drink responsibly. I think the same with all drugs, and alcohol is a drug. The more open you can be about it, the more readily you can control it. You can get help for it. You can talk openly about, I think I'm using too much of this, or someone else can talk to you about it. So I think openness is a good thing.
You're talking about talking, and that leads me to my next subject for us here. We're here on campus at Chapman University, a beautiful campus, by the way. My oldest son is here with us today. He's going to be checking it out. But we're seeing something happening which is, quite frankly, it's one of the most disturbing trends that I have seen as an adult focused on politics and society and cultural issues, and that is this attack on free speech on college campuses. Mm-hmm. We touched upon it last year. There was some discussions on it over a year because it's been percolating, but it is now a full-blown, in my mind, crisis. Both of you are here at Chapman. You're a professor, and I'm not asking you to speak for Chapman or what you're seeing here on campus, but just nationwide. Where are you with this concern?
Well, Chapman does have a policy of very openness, and you can speak your mind. That's not to say that every professor feels that they can speak their mind. That's not necessarily the case, because there is political correctness that's run amok in many ways. But it just goes to show that freedom is still a very dangerous word in America. It's dangerous in terms of drug use, in terms of free speech, economics. There's lots of examples where freedom is still a very dangerous word in America.
Are we at a point right now where, and we talked about Jordan Peterson before our interview, mm-hmm. and we had him on our show. The man is prolific. He's everywhere. He's ubiquitous right now. And most people, I think, a vast, vast, vast majority of people that hear him think that he's just preaching common sense. The people that are against him are concerned about those that take offense to words. Mm-hmm. And his argument, Jordan Peterson's argument, is, well, if we're speaking one-on-one, I really probably shouldn't offend you. It wouldn't be wise for our conversation. But what if you're 1 out of 10 and you take offense? Should I not have the right to speak? What if you're 1 out of 1,000? Should I still not have the right to speak? Because you're 1 out of those 1,000 people that would take offense to what I'm saying. And I think that's the great discussion of our time right now. And being on college campus, we're seeing speakers like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro or Kathy McDonald or Charles Murray, whoever it may be, that are literally being
shouted down.
You're no longer allowed to speak. Mm-hmm. Christine Hoff Sommers last week, I don't know if you saw the video of her speaking at Lewis and Clark, I think it was the law school. She literally was shouted out by 15 people with a sign.
By a minority of the people there.
By a minority. Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have to be there. She has a right to speak, and we have a right to hear what we want to hear, mm-hmm. and someone else has a right not to hear it, but they also have a right not to be there. If I don't want to hear certain language, I'm not going to go to a comedy club. If I don't want to hear something that doesn't match my philosophy, I don't have to go. But if they're going to use persuasive language, maybe I'll go just to hear what their argument is. Mm-hmm. What I try to teach is to persuade, not to force, and not to say I'm entitled to my opinion, but what is your opinion and why do you think that? What is your support? What is your argument? Persuade rather than force. I had a student recently who was giving a talk on her experiences as a teacher, and she gave some wonderful examples of how she teaches each student separately, individually responding to their own learning needs and their learning style. And it was a wonderful presentation, and then one of the classmates asked her, what did you learn from this? Are you going to be a teacher? And she apologized. She said, I hope I don't offend anyone by saying this, but what I really decided is that I want to be a wife and a mother. I really am looking forward to having children. But she felt that she had to apologize for wanting to be a mother. That's not free speech. Mm-hmm. If you have to apologize for saying something that you've just given a great presentation on. Mm-hmm. So as tolerant as college students try to pretend they are, they're really not tolerant of others.
They're tolerant of ideas they agree with.
Yes. I always say, could you be tolerant of a Trump supporter? Mm-hmm. And that's anathema to them. I'm not saying can you agree with a Trump supporter. Can you simply tolerate that they have an opinion? No, they can't go there. So we really don't have free speech.
We need to go back to Voltaire, right? Who said that I don't agree with what you say, but you have the right to say it, more or less.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'll defend your right to say it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And your feelings don't get in the way of facts anymore. And that's what we need to discuss, because feelings are now trumping facts. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. And so are you seeing this from both of your perspectives? I mean, we're in the bluest of blue states now. I mean, are you? Do you have a concern about the future as we're moving in this direction? Do you think it's self-correcting, or are we now putting out into corporate America a lot of people that are expecting safe spaces everywhere they go in life?
I don't find that here. I think at Chapman there is a greater sense of tolerance and of openness and persuasiveness. Mm-hmm. So while I gave that example, I don't think that is, it's nothing like the campuses where people are being shouted down. Last year we had a demonstration and it was just very well received. There were people on both sides who were there and they were interested, they were listening, and there was no anger. It was just a really wonderful opportunity to share ideas. So, I'm sure that's true at other campuses as well. So it's not everywhere, but it is definitely a problem.
We were up in the mountains the other day, and this young kid was walking by with a T-shirt saying, "I plead the Second Amendment." I plead the Second. Yeah. And I was pretty shocked that he was wearing this in California.
Yeah, that's almost as bad as a red MAGA hat.
Yeah, so I think at Chapman in particular, there is an openness, there is a desire to share, but we see it as the examples you've used, that there's too much shouting down and not listening, and too much focus on feelings.
Yeah. Now, is this something that's going to be discussed at all this summer at
We're
Freedom
putting
Fest?
We're putting the public school system on trial. So that'll be our mock trial.
That'll be our mock trial. We always have a mock trial every year that C-SPAN covers, and we put capitalism on trial, religion on trial, the Republican Party on trial, and
we're charging them with fraud.
The school system has disappointed. I mean, almost everybody would agree with that. But there are a lot of defenders in the teachers' unions, and we're going to have their representatives coming to defend the public school system. And then we'll have our critics, and we have a jury, and we have a judge. Kennedy is usually the judge who comes, and she does a great job. Mm-hmm. And we have a prosecuting and defending attorney, and they call their star witnesses, and they cross-examine. I mean, it's our most popular session, and this year it's going to be the public school system.
Public school system. Do you feel that the public school system, by and large, and I know LAUSD and Orange County, and everybody's different, right? Mm-hmm. Depending upon where you are around the world. But generally speaking, you know, one of the things that I've been studying a lot is the generational aspect of. You know, the baby boomers, they went through school and graduate school in the 1960s and 70s, and postmodernist, almost Marxist perspective to things, maybe took lessons from the Frankfurt School, right? And now they're in the ivory tower, so to speak. Now they're making the rules. And do you believe that is a transition that will eventually fade away after, you know, from a standpoint of as they age and retire, or is this now just this trend that's going to continue to, because they're training, I don't know.
I've wondered about that myself, because every generation tends to push against the parents' generation and embrace the grandparents' generation. Mm-hmm. Or their philosophy. So I've wondered about that too, if we haven't gone so far on the side of, for want of a better description, to the left, that they're going to push against that and embrace more conservative free market values. I don't know. To me, it's common sense. When Mark explained the free market to me on our first date when I was 18 years old, and he explained the free market. I'd been raised a social democrat. I thought the government should take... Ago? Yeah, 20 years ago. I had been raised a social democrat. I thought the government should fix everything, that they had all the money in the world and they could fix everything. The students today remind me of myself. But when he explained to me how the free market works, it was just common sense. And that's what I try to do even in my English classes, to explain the common sense of the free market, the common sense of doing what's best for yourself as an individual. And so I think it could go the other direction if we still have the free speech to do it. And that's really the problem. If we don't have free speech, then we can't have those voices of reason.
Right.
Explaining the way things ought to work.
Right. What are some of the other big subjects that you are looking to tackle at Freedom Fest this year?
Well, one of the things that we're debating is we're having John Mackey come in,
Whole Foods,
the CEO of Whole Foods, and he and Andy Pusner, who have both run billion-dollar companies.
We had Andy on the show.
Yeah, he's great, and he's written a book about
Carl's Jr.
on capitalism. But Carl's Jr. and Hardee's and so forth. And so John Mackey has written a book called Conscious Capitalism, and is this the best model for capitalism? Capitalism is on the defense on college campuses everywhere, but John Mackey it gets rave reviews when he's on campus, especially with MBA students, that this stakeholder philosophy if he has is really good. And so we're going to have a big discussion about conscious capitalism, pro and con, and whether that will be the best model for the future, that we can have real answers to our problems. We're also debating Hugh Hefner, who passed away, and Time and Newsweek had full cover stories about his cultural change. And did it liberate women, or did it shackle women with, demean women with the Playboy philosophy? And with the Me Too movement, we think this will be a very top issue. So we have Stephen Watts, who's written a favorable biography of Mr. Playboy, who will be debating Ross Douthat, who's the youngest columnist for the New York Times now, who argues against Hugh Hefner. So that's going to be a really fun debate to see us do that.
Wow, that's it. And that is going to be, I think, from just understanding and watching people debating on Ricochet, the legacy of Hugh Hefner and how it has led to more freedoms or
more objectification.
Yes. And you talk about Me Tooism. Is that a result of the 1960s sexual liberation, or is it And so I'm going to really try to make a point.
I think women in particular have become more victimized because of this open sexuality that we have in today's world. That we treat a woman, we see a woman now purely as a sex object. That seems to me the message that Hugh Hefner gave. Now there are others who feel differently, because the Playboy philosophy was supposed to
it's your body, you can do whatever you want to with it.
So there are some real major issues here. Also, it's the 200th anniversary of Karl Marx's birth. So we are going to discuss Marxism and communism, especially what's taking place in Venezuela. I've been very critical of the media, particularly Fox News, that refuses to do hardly anything on what's happening in Venezuela, and yet it's another Cuba, except it's 32 million people now instead of 7 or 8 million. So there are some real issues here that to say that communism is over and dead with is not right, because there's an attraction there for people who feel disenfranchised somehow from capitalism. So that's going to be one of our debate topics as well.
I would love for students, especially those that really don't have the years of wisdom to really understand economic systems, but are preaching, they're wearing the Che Guevara t-shirts and they're preaching socialism, and it just hasn't been perfected yet. I would love them to see families ripping apart a horrible looking piece of food in the middle of a swampy street in Venezuela and Caracas right now.
Eating zoo animals.
It is horrific. It's devastating.
I'll tell you an ironic statistic that just came out. So Stephen Hanke at Johns Hopkins University does the Misery Index, and he rates countries all around the country by the Misery Index, which is inflation, interest rates, GDP. It looks at a number of objective statistics. So the country with the best record of the Misery Index, the least miserable index, turns out to be China. And the country with the worst Misery Index on the opposite end is Venezuela. So both countries run by communists. One is adopting a successful formula. The other is adopting an absolutely disastrous formula. So it raises a rather interesting question of where we're headed. Even among communists, they're in turmoil over what's the direction that they should take. It's kind of an interesting irony,
it's
if
fascinating.
you will.
It's fascinating.
The other thing we have is we always have a keynote speaker, and last year it was William Shatner, as you said. fantastic presentation. Before that was George Foreman, the heavyweight champion. Before that, we did have Donald Trump. But we also had Paul Krugman come and debate Steve Moore. So we've had some really great people who have come in and created a lot of buzz. And this year it's George Will, who's considered by the Wall Street Journal as the most powerful journalist today, a man who has worked for ABC News, Fox News, and NBC or CNBC. So you're going to get a really good perspective of an individual who has really been across the political spectrum from one end to the other. Should be really interesting.
Yeah. And as we talked about, he dumped his Republican card last year. And is now looking at from a perspective of conservatism or traditional conservatism as an independent now. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a number of people who have made no bones about their criticism of President Trump, and particularly his personal behavior. I think that's the thing that turns off George Will and Ross Douthat have been very critical of Trump in terms of his behavior, personal behavior, and how he insults people and all that sort of thing.
I think we've seen a lot of mental acrobat, from a standpoint of a conservative who supports these policies.
Right.
As opposed to supporting him tweeting somebody and saying something that's inappropriate for that office.
And it was somewhat like Bill Clinton in the same way. Bill Clinton seemed to have a lot of great policies that really worked. Right. And yet his personal life, same thing, had the major issues.
It was disgusting. Now, Jo Ann, you're overseeing the Anthem Film Festival, and while you're not ready to release all of the films this summer, you do have a few that you know are going to be there.
We did. Our final deadline isn't until April 15th, so I anticipate we'll still get several good films in, and then we'll have to make our final decisions based on how much time we have and based on the rest of the films. But there are a few that we are just good enough that we know we want to use them. We were just speaking about communism. We have a couple of them on communism. Hawk Jensen is a wonderful filmmaker who has something he calls the Witness Project. He goes around the country and around the world interviewing people who have fled regimes. Last year we had a film that he had done about Anastasia Lin from China. This year he submitted a film from Poland, a woman from Poland called Wanda Lawrence, and she was a freedom fighter during World War II in the Polish resistance, and then lived under the Russian regime, and finally she and her family escaped, like the Von Trapp family did, over the Alps into Austria. It's a wonderful story, and you were mentioning, wouldn't it be great if young people could see what it's like? What I love about what Hawk Jensen is doing is that he tells these stories in 8 to 10 minutes. And it's a start-to-finish story that tugs at your heartstrings for what they went through personally. It explains why these regimes are wrong, why freedom is so important. We have another one that's about a woman from Cuba. So he's doing a great job with this, and I just say keep them coming. We'll show them every year if he does a new one every year. We have another film called Saber Rock, which is about a translator in Afghanistan. When we have soldiers go into other countries, we need local people to translate and to help us get into places. And he was so good at what he did that he and his family were marked for assassination. And then his difficulty trying to immigrate to the United States where they could be safe, but it was right when Trump closed the wall to immigration and to refugees, not recognizing that some of these refugees really are needing to fear for their lives, and they're definitely our allies. This is a man who risked his life to help our soldiers. And again, it's just a short documentary, 15 minutes, and tells such a powerful story. I love filmmaking because it tells such a great story.
And some of her films have gone on to win Emmy.
Well, the one I mentioned earlier, Seized, about civil asset forfeiture, it won Best Short Documentary at our film. It premiered at our festival, and then it went on to win an Emmy in June. So I was really proud of them, and it's the same guys who did Saber Rock. So it's been fun to watch them grow as filmmakers.
Yeah, I want to talk about a couple other films, but I was there last year, and there were a slate of incredible films. Anything happening with those in the last year?
Yes, our two grand prize winners, the Little Pink House, which won in the great movie, Eminent Domain, about the Suzette Kelo case, where her she had to give up her house and sell it to Pfizer so that they could build a laboratory, which incidentally they never built. They bulldozed all those houses, and there's nothing there.
It was up in New Jersey?
Connecticut.
Oh, Connecticut. Okay,
yep,
that's right.
yep. And it's called Little Pink House because it was a pink house, and it's opening next month in theaters.
That's great.
And What Happened in Vegas was our best documentary about police brutality in Las Vegas and outright murders in Las Vegas. Powerful film. In fact, the mother...
Murders by police,
By the police, yes. And the mother of one of the victims was in our audience. We had a press conference. And now it's also gone on to distribution, and it's being shown in Las Vegas theaters right now. And he's been...
What's the reception to that been? Has it been
vilified?
He has had a really hard time with the police trying to keep them.
I would understand that.
They were all set to screen at a theater, and suddenly the theater wasn't going to screen them after all.
Yeah.
And then they had to find another venue. What Happened in Vegas? I think it's also available on Netflix, so your viewers could get it there. Powerful film, and now he even he edited it to add some information about what happened in October at Mandalay Bay. So it's a really good film.
Has he? Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And is there any association with BLM, Black Lives Matter, or anything to do with that? Or?
No, not in his particular film, although most of the victims were black, but not all of them. One was a case that happened at Costco where a former Marine had a concealed carry permit, and he had a gun with him, and when he bent over to look at something in Costco, somebody saw the gun and called the police, and the police came, and the next thing you know, he's dead.
Wow.
Yeah, and
tragic.
Had not done anything except he had a concealed carry.
We did put the police on trial at last year's FreedomFest as our mock trial, and we did have a representative of the NAACP and Black Lives Matter. It represented both groups to defend the police. So it was a really interesting.
No, not to defend. They
to prosecute.
He was on the side of the prosecution.
Larry Elder was there to defend the police.
Prosecution.
Larry Elder was great. We had him on our show last year while we were at Freedom Fest, and we had him on for a good 45, 50 minutes, whatever it was, and fascinating. And
he'll be back at this year.
Yeah, so you get a lot of really high-profile guests, talk radio guests, writers, journalists, people that are on the TV. And so that's always good as well, because people get to mix with the people that they see and they hear.
Yeah, in fact,
Judge Napolitano's coming back this year.
Judge Napolitano. And by the way, one of the things that's unique about our conference is we do not have a green room for speakers to hide. They like to be there. They mingle with everybody, and you could end up sitting next to Steve Forbes, who's there all 3 days.
Yep.
And it's just wonderful to be able to meet with celebrities and go up and talk to them. And with some exceptions, they're pretty open.
They're very open. Steve Forbes is one of the most open individuals. Yeah. I've spoken with him now a couple of years in a row there.
Yeah,
he's really nice. Last year was his 70th.
Yeah.
He's our co-ambassador along with John Mackey, and he's famous for having changed his schedule to attend all 3 days. So it's amazing for people who are as busy as they are to come and spend 3 days at a conference that's not even run by them; it's run by others. So it speaks volumes of how much fun Freedom Fest is.
Yeah, Steve is one of our favorites, and he always comes to the Saturday night banquet and he dances with everybody. It's so much fun.
And by the way, that's another thing that's unique. Our Saturday night banquet and our dance is pretty spectacular, because you go to a lot of conferences where there's a dance band but nobody's dancing. Not at Freedom Fest. Everybody's out on the floor. It's really great.
Yeah. Well, it's the crowd that comes. Everybody's
they're there to dance.
Everybody's there to have a good time.
To socialize.
To socialize.
We're friends. friends.
Yeah.
We're friends, and it's like a reunion. And there are people who've been there for 10 years.
Yeah.
It's their favorite thing that they do every year. They get to know each other, and at the same time, they're welcoming new people. They love welcoming the newbies and telling them, how to get the most out of Freedom Fest. So it's a reunion. It's a family
I do
reunion.
a lot of conventions. Just as I mentioned, just got back from CPAC. There's Politicon. There's a whole bunch of others. And Freedom Fest, I feel that there is an energy there. Yeah. There's some kind of just this current that's with everybody, and it's a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. It really is. It's a lot of fun. So
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the dates again are going to be
July 11th through the 14th. So 7-Eleven in Vegas is when it starts, and that's when George Will speaks.
Okay.
On Wednesday.
On Wednesday, and he's only going to be there on Wednesday. So we're encouraging everybody to come
get
in
it early
to hear him speak.
And speaking of early, your followers should know that we have an early bird deadline, March 31st. So if they want to save $200, they should register right away.
Website?
FreedomFest.com.
FreedomFest.com.
Mm-hmm.
And you can follow it on Facebook and on Twitter and all those wonderful things as well to get notifications.
That's right.
Yeah. So you got the Anthem Film Fest, and just for people that are wondering how that all works, you've got a theater. You've got literally a theater at the Paris Hotel where people can sit in and watch these films.
Yes, it's the Anthem Libertarian Film Festival. Our focus is individuality, accountability, and choice. Mm-hmm. A lot of our films are about government, but not necessarily. We have several films that are just about individuals taking care of themselves. I love that. Libertarian heroes don't ask somebody else to fix things. They fix it themselves. We've been going for 8 years now. We get bigger every year. We have a dedicated theater. We show films around the clock.
Yeah, you do.
And it's free. It's part of Freedom Fest. If you just want to come to the film festival, you can buy a film lover's ticket. But if you buy a Freedom Fest ticket, everything's included.
Yeah, I'm very busy when I'm at these things, but I did take a little bit of time, and I meandered around, and I walked in, and I saw I Am Jack, and fantastic movie last year. And I know that's gone on to do big things as well for them. So
about identity politics.
Identity politics, and he was fighting the LAUSD to figure out how he can, get his son and daughter not unclassified. They weren't black, they weren't white, they weren't Latino. It was really interesting.
Something funny about that, just this last week, he won at a film festival. For Best Foreign Film.
Wow.
And he said he didn't know if it was because he's so many different nationalities mixed into one, or if it's because he's deaf and he talks with an accent, but it's a deaf accent, it's not a foreign accent. But he won Best Foreign Documentary.
Super nice guy. I saw
He's
him
a wonderful
guy.
guy.
At the gym at 6 a.m. that morning, so we were chatting a little bit. Yeah.
The other thing that's really cool about Freedom Fest is our exhibit area, which John Mackey calls the Trade Show for Liberty. So I've often viewed it as a one-stop shopping for liberty, if you will. You just walk into this exhibit hall, and it's just a lot of buzz, and there's all the think tanks and the freedom organizations, and our big bookstore in the middle.
Yes.
I mean, we're really big.
And you have book signings there.
We have book signings, and you get to meet the people, and C-SPAN is there, and we've had virtual reality type of programming there, and we have our pitch tank, which is entrepreneurs like the Shark Tank
for angels.
We have angel investors there, and so we have financial information, because financial freedom is also a very important part of freedom. So we and that's my background as well in the investment world. So we have financial people there as well, and we have Robert Kiyosaki coming this year, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, 26 million copies, so he's coming.
Yeah.
And Alex Green and all kinds of great speakers, top-notch financial speakers.
And don't forget, people can get their swag bag, walk around, and just start throwing stuff into their
bag.
Right. Thousands of pins and all sorts of fun stuff. So, well, we're looking forward to it. We're looking forward to being there. We're looking forward to joining both of you as well. And folks can find you again online. It's freedomfest.com. Is there a separate site for the Anthem Libertarian Film Festival?
AnthemFilmFestival.com.
AnthemFilmFestival.com. And are you still taking submissions?
We're taking submissions until April 15th. We have our deadline March 30th, and we have a super late deadline April 15th, and then we'll be making our announcements May 1st.
Okay, and how does that work, just out of curiosity? Is there a panel?
I have a panel of judges. I have a programmer I'm working with who helps me select the films, and then I have a panel of judges who help me select the winners. And then the audience does the Audience Choice Awards. We pass out ballots, and they help us choose which ones are their favorites.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And the first prize is how much?
$2,500.
$2,500 prize. So
Wow, not chump change. You do a lot of damage at Vegas at $2,500.
That's right.
And the good news is that you get to stay inside the whole time because it's only about 115 degrees outside.
Well, and we're at the Paris Hotel
nice
now.
and air conditioned.
It is.
Yes.
We have the Paris Hotel, and we have a great room block at a great rate at Paris. But Bally's, which is under the same roof, is about 2/3 the price of the.
Yeah, that's what I did last year, by the way.
It's not that far away.
No, I walked straight in. You're under the same roof as you just talked about.
Under the same roof. It's the same distance as it is to the Paris. The conference center is right in the middle between Bally's and Paris Hotel. So you can stay for $89 a night, right under the same roof. And we have this lovely conference center that's all very French Baroque kind of styling.
That's beautiful. It really is stunning.
Oscar Goodman, the mayor or former mayor of Las Vegas, says that FreedomFest is the most unique conference in Vegas because it's an intellectual feast in the entertainment capital of the world, and there's nothing like it. So that was a pretty nice compliment.
Yeah, no,
and you never have to leave, so don't worry about the heat.
No, you don't.
Well, at night you can go out,
but everything's connected anyway. And so we sat outside one night. There was a group of us, and we sat at a restaurant, literally at Paris, but it was on the Strip. And so we were right across from the Bellagio. We were watching the fountains, and it was cool enough for us to enjoy a wonderful evening. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. So, well, we're looking forward to it. Again, the website, freedomfest.com, and Anthem Film Festival.
AnthemFilmFestival.com, freedomfest.com.
And Early Bird Special is?
Early Bird Special ends March 31st. $200 off March 31st, and July 11th to the 14th.
We also have special rates, by the way, for students. It's only $129 subsidized. And we have young professionals rate that's quite a bit available. Lower. It's a little bit lower than our normal price. So
great.
It's a great conference. A couple thousand people show up every year, and it's just wonderful to get together of like-minded individuals. There's just a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of buzz.
Yeah. Karaoke at
real
night.
Real energy there.
And seeing you both running around last year, you talk about buzz. You guys are so busy, but you're so friendly. You're yet approachable, and you're running this massive convention.
Yeah,
I did 20,000 steps on my Fitbit and never leave the hotel.
That's crazy. That's crazy. But it's commendable. And I was saying to Melissa, our producer at Mooski Politics last year, I said, they're stopping and saying hello to everybody.
Oh yeah.
So
well, we love everybody. It's our favorite week of the year.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to it as well. Looking forward to joining you. So, folks, check out freedomfest.com and the anthemfilmfestival.com, and hope to see you all in Las Vegas. And Jo Ann and Mark Skousen, thank you so much for your time.
David, thank you. Real
pleasure.
Great to be with you.
Thank you.